They are watchers in the wild, sentinels at the edge of the known world, monster hunters, wanderers, guardians of balance. We call them rangers, a name older than fantasy. In medieval England, rangers patrolled royal forests as keepers of hidden laws, protectors of game and grove. In myth, they are wild men and wandering sages, vanishing into shadow, returning with truths no court dares speak. In legend, they are outcast knights and reluctant kings, safeguarding the world and the wilderness. Across time, they've taken many names: Artemis, divine huntress; Robin Hood, noble thief; the Green Knight, cryptic challenger; Hawkeye, scout of the American frontier; Strider, heir of a broken line. Always they stand apart, never quite of the world they protect. But what makes a ranger? Skill, allegiance, belief, or something older? A conviction that someone must hold the line without praise, without reward. Today, we follow the history, mythology, and evolution of the ranger. The word ranger first appears in English law as early as the 13th century, a royal title, a role of duty. In the wake of the 1217 Charter of the Forest, rangers patrolled the king's woodlands, guardians of sacred groves and game preserves, enforcing the invisible boundaries between crown and commoner, nature and encroachment. Priests had their temples, knights had their oaths. These wardens held something older, something ancient. From the borders of civilization to the deepest green, they moved through both realms. Part forest dweller, part courtier, something hard to pin down. Centuries later, the name ranger found new meaning. In the American colonies, frontier rangers became scouts and pathfinders. Men like Robert Rogers, whose rules of ranging laid down the foundation for a new kind of warrior. Move light, strike fast, know the land better than your enemy. They were ruthless when they had to be, but they understood something deeper. Knowledge of the terrain was its own kind of power. Survival was more than a skill, it was a philosophy. But the roots go deeper still. Before laws or battlefields, there were stories. The wild man of the woods, a figure carved into medieval churches and whispered of in Germanic folktales, was neither villain nor saint. He was a force. A reminder that man is not master of the forest, but a guest. From that primal figure, the archetype emerged. The Green Knight, a challenger bearing ancient wisdom. Cernunnos, antlered god of beasts and crossroads, silent guardian of balance. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, protector, punisher, boundary keeper. Through folklore, the ranger became the hero. Robin Hood hides in Sherwood Forest to uphold the law where his kings have failed. He defends the poor, humbles the powerful, and disappears into the trees when his work is done. A thief, yes, but one who restores what injustice has taken from his land and people. Across the ocean, James Fenimore Cooper's Hawkeye, Natty Bumppo of the leather-stocking tales, carries that spirit into the American wilderness. Hunter, scout, judge, at home with both settlers and native tribes, yet fully belonging to neither. He is the blueprint for the modern frontiersman, a man of the land, guided by conscience more than country. All of these figures, mythic, historic, and literary, share something essential. They live on the threshold. They guide others through danger, then vanish back to their isolation. They stand between the wild and the world. Praise passes them by. Still they keep the fire burning, long after others have forgotten it. The ranger, at heart, is a liminal figure, a keeper of crossing places, a necessary, often unseen presence who reads the signs before others know there's danger at all. And it's through this tradition that the archetype finds its way into fantasy, through Tolkien, through Gygax, through Salvatore, with figures like Aragorn and Drizzt. When we first meet Aragorn, he's a shadowy figure in a corner of the prancing pony, a hooded stranger known only as Strider, rough-voiced, sharp-eyed, and deeply mistrusted. But even then, we can sense the weight he carries. Tolkien's Rangers are the last of the Dunedain of Arnor, the Men of the West, a dwindling line of long-lived wanderers descended from ancient kings. Their kingdom once ruled the north, and when it fell, they endured. They became watchers in the wild, a scattered, secretive people who roamed the waste of Eriador, warding off evil from lands that no longer remembered their names. Wilderness scouts, swords at the border, healers of the wounded, and watchmen for a world that barely knows they exist. Aragorn was born into this fading legacy, the heir of Isildur, raised in Rivendell under the name Estelle, Hope. There, under Elrond's care, he learned the histories of both elves and men, but when the time came, he left that sanctuary to take up the mantle of his bloodline. He became Strider, a name spoken with suspicion in towns and inns of Bree, a cloaked figure who walked the wilderness in gray and green, grim of bearing, sharp of eye, and never far from danger. He tracked orcs, hunted bandits, guarded the borders of the Shire for years without the hobbits ever knowing. He served as Gandalf's shadow. His skills were unmatched: blade, bow, stealth, healing, languages, lore. But the burden defined him more than his blade ever did. He carried the memory of a kingdom long fallen and the quiet vow to make the world safer than the one he'd inherited. When Frodo meets him, Aragorn guides them by circumstance. He protects them by conviction. He was born to power, but walked as if burdened by it. This is the shape of the Ranger, a silent guardian who carries the weight of history on his shoulders and keeps the flame alive in lands that have forgotten the fire. When Dungeons & Dragons carved the worlds of fantasy into rules of pen and paper, the Ranger was one of the early archetypes to take shape. Tolkien had given the archetype form, D&D gave it function. In Ed Greenwood's Forgotten Realms, the Ranger becomes a presence woven into the borders of the world, a reflection of the land they protect. They patrol the wilds beyond the spine of the world where frost giants roam and ancient evils stir beneath the stone. In the Dale lands, they walk beneath the boughs of Cormanthor, where elven ruins sleep and old magic clings to root and leaf. In Cormyr, they guide nobles through dangerous woods, serve as scouts for armies, or vanish into the night to patrol forgotten trails. Some serve gods, most notably Mialiki, the Lady of the Forest, patron of rangers, druids, and woodland paths. Her faithful walk the wilds in her name, acting as both sword and steward. Others honor Sylvanas, the Oak Father, or Eldath, the goddess of peace, but always the Ranger stands for balance within nature rather than dominion over it. Many also serve the Harpers, a secretive order of spies, minstrels, and rangers sworn to fight tyranny and preserve harmony. To the Harpers, the Ranger is a perfect agent, self-sufficient, loyal, and capable of walking paths where most soldiers cannot. Some serve neither gods nor creeds. They answer only to the land, or to their own conscience. Across Faerûn, the Ranger appears in many forms: forest sentinel, horizon scout, beast tamer, monster hunter. But always they exist at the edge, where the wilderness encroaches, where evil gathers, where roads end and danger begins. They know the scent of a wounded beast, the sign of a goblin trap, the way the air bends before a storm. Rather than wait for evil to reach town, they find it first. The Realms remembers its rangers through quiet stories, a caravan that made it safely through the mountains, a village that never knew how close it came to ruin, a monster slain and left where it could hunt no more. To most, they are myths, but to those who've been saved by one, they are the reason the sun continues to rise. The elves of Middle-earth were born beneath the open sky. Drizzt Do'Urden was born to a city carved in stone, lit by fairy fire and ruled by evil. Menzoberranzan, the capital of the Lothian Drow, a place where power is earned through treachery and mercy is punished with death. He was raised to be a killer, trained in the deadliest techniques of martial combat, taught to serve his matron mother without hesitation or remorse. But even in those halls of violence, Drizzt questioned. He mastered the technique, but he questioned the purpose. He spared his opponents during training. He defied the rituals meant to break his conscience. And when the time came to take his place in Drow society, he ran. He fled into the Underdark, the vast, lightless world beneath the surface, a labyrinth of stone and madness where monsters are born and the gods do not smile. There for 10 years he lived alone. His only companion was Guinevere, a magical black panther summoned from the astral plane. It was a life of survival lived far from any glory. He learned to hunt in silence, to track by subtle reverberations and scent, to read the cavern rock as if it were a sky full of stars. He did not master the Underdark. He endured it, and in doing so became something new. He emerged into the surface world seeking peace. Instead, he found fear, suspicion, and hatred. To most on the surface, a drow was a monster. Still, he stayed. He roamed the forests of the northern Sword Coast. He studied the movement of animals, the subtle signals of predator and prey. He tried to understand the land, to live in harmony with it. And then he met Montolio de Brucci, a blind human ranger, a devotee of the goddess Mythology. He taught Drizzt the common tongue, the names and uses of plants and herbs. Montolio did more than train him. He confirmed what Drizzt already knew, that nature has its own kind of order, its own kind of justice, and that those who understand it, who listen, must protect it. Under Montolio's guidance, Drizzt didn't just become a ranger in practice, he became one in philosophy. He made no pledge to Mythology, he wore no harper's pen, yet he patrolled the wilds, tracked monsters, protected the weak. He learned the land he traveled, he respected the animals he hunted. He saved lives often at his own expense, and when others fled danger, he stepped toward it. They come from two different worlds, yet Aragorn and Drizzt walked a similar path. Both are heirs to legacies they did not seek. Aragorn is the last of the Dunedain, destined to rule a kingdom that no longer remembers him. Drizzt is the son of a drow house built on cruelty and station. Rejecting his entire culture was his only way to survive. Each turns away from what was expected and steps into the wilderness to become something else. They earned the name by living the code. Solitude tempered them. The wild gave them purpose. Aragorn roamed the wilds, hunting the servants of Sauron and guarding the Shire. Drizzt patrolled the frontiers of Icewind Dale, slaying frost giants and fending off the dark relics of his past. Neither sought recognition. Both chose the edge of the world because it gave them peace. They practiced the skills of the ranger, tracking, hunting, swordplay, knowledge of ancient lands, but their defining traits are harder to see: compassion, moral clarity, a sense of duty that exists outside the law, outside of kingdom, outside of praise. Like Robin Hood, they live outside the structures of power but uphold its truest purpose. Like Hawkeye, they bridge two worlds without fully belonging to either. Like the ancient green men of folklore, they move with the land rather than against it, part guardian, part judge. In a world that too often defines heroes by crowns, destiny, or divine right, Aragorn and Drizzt show us that the truest ranger is chosen by the wilderness itself, and by their own choice to protect it. In 1975, Dungeons & Dragons framed the Ranger archetype with rules, spells, proficiencies, a favored enemy, an animal companion, definitions for mechanical use. But many true fantasy rangers barely fit this strict mold. Drizzt Do'Urden is the most famous ranger in the Forgotten Realms. He started as a fighter, trained in the deadliest techniques of drow combat at Melee Mag Thair. Beyond his innate drow abilities, fairy fire and darkness, he casts no spells at all. He communes with no beast the way the Ranger's D&D class is designed. He respects Mialiki's teachings but does not pledge to her or draw power from her. Even his fighting style leans more fighter than ranger. By the rules, he barely looks like a ranger. Aragorn would fail the same test. Robin Hood, Hawkeye, the wild men of the oldest tales, none of them would survive an audit of the character sheet. But the question mistakes the class for the calling. The archetype is not defined by game rules. The Ranger has always been a creature of tension between city and wilderness, between warrior and guide, between isolation and service. A figure like that resists definition by design. If Drizzt defies the class, it's because his story is bigger than the game. Aragorn the King is still Strider the Ranger. That the greatest rangers do not conform to the rules isn't a flaw in the characters, it's the proof that the archetype offers more than a class can define. Every heroic archetype comes with its reward. The knight wins glory on the battlefield and songs carry their name. The wizard earns renown for their knowledge, sought by kings and scholars alike. The paladin stands in the light of their god, celebrated as virtue made flesh. The ranger receives none of this. Their victories happen without witnesses. A monster slain in the deep woods, a raid turned back before it reached the farms, a traveler guided through the pass and safely home. The people they protect rarely even know their names. What draws someone to that life? Part of the answer lies in where the ranger stands. They serve two worlds at once. They defend the town from the gathering dark, and they defend the wild from the advancing town. The medieval ranger's first duty was protecting the forest itself, its game, its groves, its old boundaries. Artemis punished those who trespassed against the hunt. The wardens of every age have held back the axe as often as the wolf. The ranger sees what both sides miss. The village fears the forest suffers the village. The ranger loves them both and answers to the balance between them. That is a duty no crown can assign and no god needs to command. It comes from knowing the land. Enough years reading the wind, tracking the seasons, learning what the wilderness gives and what it costs, and protection stops being a job. It becomes an instinct, and a duty that carries no glory with it. The work succeeds in silence or fails in blood. So what makes a ranger? They hold a bond with the land itself and the will to serve it without praise, without reward, for as long as the watch demands. The ranger serves and asks for nothing in return.